Hi guys, welcome back to Daniel Security Academy. As always, feel free, relax, get yourself a drink or whatever you want to have right now. Grab some lunch, grab some dinner, whatever, and make yourself comfortable. Certificates and PKI, even though we are also going to talk a little bit about digital signatures, but just a little bit about this one. For the start, we'll start with the comparison of digital signature versus digital certificate. It will be not comprehensive, so it will be just on a high level. It's more about introducing you to the topic of digital certificate than actually talking about digital signatures. But we're also going to talk about digital signature in terms of a process, even though we have pretty much already run through an entire process of the signature when we were talking about the DSA, the digital signature algorithm. So that's also the reason why I'm not going into more detail here and rather talk about the digital certificates. We'll talk about digital certificate structure. So how does a certificate look like? Also taking one example I pulled from Teams. And lastly, talking about the concept of public key infrastructure. What kind of components do we have there? How do they function with each other? How do we interact with those functions? And yeah, into digital signature versus digital certificate. Okay, it sounds a bit more tremendous than it should be, but digital certificates are pretty much public keys signed by a digital signature in a nutshell. And to illustrate this a little bit more, I put up this box. So everything in this box is like also related to digital signature, and digital certificate is just a subset of the digital signature topic. And we do have two different kinds of certificates. We have client-based and server-based certificates. For the client-based certificates, those are associated with a user or an entity and are stored on a computer, for example. For the server-based example, you have a certificate which is assigned to a server or a service specifically and is, for example, used to establish a connection in a client-server communication. For example, when I, as a client, want to approach google.com, the Google server will present me a certificate, a server-based certificate, which we use as a base for our encryption. And as I said, signature is only supposed to be like a topic on the side here, but I still want to run quickly through it, even though we have covered it before in the digital signature algorithm. Digital signatures in general provide integrity and non-repudiation. So when you were carefully listening to me in the first, I think it was the first session actually, where I was talking about the key concepts and main principles of IT security, we were talking about integrity and non-repudiation. So will come handy here if you actually have listened to me at this session. Just joking. So digital signature from a process perspective is a sender wants to send data. Could be anything, any kind of data. Could be a mail, could be a file, could be a message, whatever. And in order to do so, the sender does not only send the data itself, but also does run a hash on the message and encrypts the hash with his own private key. So when you look at on the graph at the right hand side, it's pretty much, I hope this works. So sender has data, will run a hash on the data, and based on the public, on the private key encryption, it will end up with a digital signature. So you have data here, it's the same icon again, and this one is a digital signature derived from the hash and the private key. So next step is, as I already said, okay, I can jump to the next one. The recipient receives the message and the signature, and which is pretty much, let me get back the laser pointer, which is here. We're here now, so we transferred through the evil and unsecure internet bubble, and we're now here with this receiver side. So it receives the data and the digital signature as a package, and the recipient pretty much applies the same hash algorithm to the message, and on the other hand decrypts the digital signature using the sender's public key. So let's focus on the stream on top here. So we take the data, run the hash again. So we have the hash here. Then we run, we pick the public key of the sender, which he makes public, as it's a public key, and decrypt the signature using the public key to receive again a hash, pretty much this box to receive this box unencrypted. And if both hashes matches, so the one we just did on the message itself, plain, and the one we decrypted, if those match, then the data has not been modified, and we are sure that the sender is actually the sender of the message. So that's why we have integrity and non-repudiation here. So the sender cannot, the receiver can verify that the data is actually coming from the sender and that it has not been tampered. Yeah, that's pretty much digital signature in a process nutshell. Moving over to the actual topic of this session, pretty much digital certificates. Let's talk about the structure. The one you see on the left hand is a very simplified structure of the certificate, but it still contains like the most important bits and pieces of the certificate. And for example, the owner's details. For example, you have on top the owner's distinguished name and the public key. You have the issuer details, so the certificate authority's name and the validity, so the lifetime of the certificate, when does it expire, and many, many more additional parameters you can set within this kind of certificates. And the issuer confirms the owner, the authenticity, and also quite kind of bails for him. So he confirms to everyone else, okay, this is the guy, and he is he's fine, and you can trust him and connect securely with him. That's pretty much what the this certificate authority is doing. And I just brought up an example. I hope you can see it just fine on your screen. And because this is a certificate I pulled up from teams.microsoft.com, because it's a good example of what kind of fields you have in a certificate. And on the next slide, I don't even have screenshotted all of the fields we have within this certificate. But what we can see, let me turn on the laser pointer again, is here's the certificate itself, teams.microsoft.com, and you see the chain of trust. So the intermediate certificate authority, it's Microsoft RSA TLS CA02, and the root certificate is Baltimore Cyber Trust root. What those kind of like intermediate CA and root CA means, we'll see in a bit when I talk about the public key infrastructure. But for the time being, leave it like it is right now. You see the subject name, which is teams.microsoft.com. You see the issuer, which is Microsoft Corporation. You see how long it's valid. It's not valid before the 7th of October and is only valid till the 7th of October 22. You have alternative names. In this case, it's just teams.microsoft.com. And you have some information regarding the public key. So it's based on an RSA algorithm. It's on a key size of 2048 bit and some modulus information. We just keep going with the certificate because we are also seeing some more details here in terms of signature algorithm used, which is SHA-256 with RSA encryption. With the fingerprints in the two different hashing algorithms in SHA-256 and SHA-1. What the key is used or extendedly used. For example, here purpose it's called digital signature, key encipherment, data encipherment, and for extended usages it's server authentication and client authentication. So pretty much for any kind of authentication purpose, if it's both client and server. And on the bottom we have one important part of the certificate, which is the CRL, which is the certificate revocation list, where we can find the lists of certificates this intermediate or this issuing CA has revoked in the past. And whatever we do is, before we trust the certificate, we make sure to check this list and see if this certificate of teams.microsoft.com with the fingerprint and public key is maybe already been revoked by Microsoft because it was compromised. So this certificate revocation list is a very important piece of the public key infrastructure. And we will have additional parameter, which if you just keep scrolling, I didn't screenshot it anymore, but there are like many more IDs and keys you will find in the certificate. So let's talk about public key infrastructure. It is asymmetric and symmetric encryption for the certificate and uses hashing to check and verify the integrity. The primary goal is to keep the private key secure. I'm not really talking or telling you something new, because those things you already know. You know the stuff about hashing, you know the stuff about keeping the private key secure. I've told you this 1,000 times already within the sessions. The private key is super important, keep it safe. But yeah, it is one of the key concepts. So let's repeat it. When you have a big, or let's call it an important public key infrastructure, you usually have a copy of the key pair stored securely in a central key repository. This could be anything. This could be a server or system which is in a high security area, or it could be also that you have printed the key out. You have a digital version on a USB stick, which you just put into a bank, into the bank pretty much. And yeah, it could be pretty much everything here. And there are many organizations or processes which establish a two administrator concept or guideline, that you need two administrators to maintain or restore or use the actual key pair of one of the private keys for the public key infrastructure. And the thing is, why this is so important is not only just because of hackers maybe attacking or getting grip on the key itself, but it's also about that if the private key is lost, all encrypted data is no longer be usable. So if you do have something which you still need to decrypt, because for example you have your hard drive encrypted with AES-256 and you lose the private key to decrypt the encrypted files, you can no longer use those files, or will just gibberish on your hard drive. That's why this private key is so important, because it's at the end the ultimate key you need to do communication or retrieve your encrypted data. Okay. For public key infrastructures, we usually have a 3-tier architecture, which is just outlined on the left. We have a root certificate authority, which is pretty much usually deployed, generates a certificate or multiple certificates for underlying intermediate certificate authorities, intermediate CAs. And then this machine just gets shut down and put securely somewhere, like for example at the bank. And the reason is because what I told you like a few minutes ago, when the private key is lost or compromised, the entire structure is compromised or lost. So same applies here for the public key infrastructure. The root certificate or the root CA is the most important and most integral part of the security concept. So you do not want this to be compromised, hacked, lost, or damaged. That's why you want to have it shut down and put to a secure place. On the other hand, you have the intermediate CAs, which are in between the root certificate authorities and the actual issuing certificate authorities, which are in the next level. Those are generating certificates for the actual issuing CAs, but those are not turned off. So if intermediate CA is being compromised, stolen, damaged, the damage is bad, but it's not like the entire chain of trust is destroyed for this company. So just the subsequent CAs are affected by this one. So if you take a look on the example on the left-hand side, the right intermediate CA, if this one breaks down, it only affects one issuing CA. So this one would be not too bad. On the other hand, the left one would affect 2 issuing CAs, making them not be usable anymore. So yeah, it's not horrible, but it's also something we really need to make sure that those intermediate CAs are also working properly. And then I already teased it already. The bottom layer or the third tier of this architecture is issuing CAs, which are actually creating and signing certificates for users, for machines, for services, for server. And those are the ones creating the certificates for the entire IT infrastructure. And often those CAs are grouped or have a specific function or a specific group of certificates. For example, if a company is getting bigger, you usually have one certificate authority just dealing with user certificates. You have one just dealing with machine certificates, and maybe one just dealing with some kind of server or REST API certificates. So you will want to divide those functions to do different kind of CAs. Also to pretty much spread the risk of a compromise. So the more you spread, the less certificates are affected if one CA is being compromised. On the other hand, you have like additional operational overhead if you have many of those CAs. Let's talk a little bit about the process on how to both retrieve a certificate from a CA and also how to use it. On the left-hand side, you see is an example structure of a certificate authority and the different functions the certificate authority has. For example, it creates certificates based on their own private key. It can be used to verify it based on the public key. And there are multiple ways to actually request a certificate from a certificate authority. One example would be a certificate signing request, CSR. And maybe let's use the left painting here to explain the process a little bit. So this user on the bottom wants to have a certificate to be able to authenticate itself towards an application. So this user is filling out a CSR, a certificate signing request, sends it to the registration of the certificate authority, which will check the input, check the template to be used, and based on the template provided, it will do the certification and send the certificate itself to the user. This certificate then will be sent from the user to the application, showing like, hey, I'm here, this is my certificate, and XYZ certified my identity and trustness, so please let me use your application. So the application will check on the certificate revocation list, as already mentioned, and will confirm with the certificate authority, is this certificate valid and good to go? And the certificate authority will confirm the application, yes, this one is good to go and can be done, or it can be accepted pretty much. So as you can already see, the certificate authorities are the base of the PKI concept. For PKI, we also have one important piece to remember, because there are, so in order for the computer to function, as soon as you roll out an operating system, if there were no pre-installed trusted root certificates, you would not be able to communicate with the internet at all. So you could not use your Microsoft Internet Explorer, go to chrome.com to download Chrome or download Firefox for the first action you do with a new operating system. You could not do this because your browser would not trust anything which is happening on the internet, because pretty much the entire internet right now is based on end-to-end encryption, or not end-to-end, but at least transport security and transport encryption. So yeah, you kind of need those pre-installed root certificates, and those are installed, as it pretty much says, within your operating system from the starting point. And you need the entire chain of trust so it works. So I hope you can see a little bit on the bottom here, because this is a short extract of the trusted root certificates within macOS. And you will find different kind of information here, like name, issued by, how it's issued, like what kind of algorithm is being used, and some details about the key length, expiry date, fingerprints, and all those kind of things. And as far as I know, both macOS and Microsoft are using the same or almost the same number, and also the same certificates in the pre-installed library. So yeah, you should be good to go with those ones, and should be ready to trust the required authorities from the start on to download whatever you want from the first step once you install the OS on it, on the computer. And lastly, I want to talk about the certificate revocation list and the methods on how to check revoked certificates, because there are multiple ways on how to check the validity of a certificate. I mentioned the CRL before. So the process here is pretty much, let me bring up the laser pointer again. A client wants to connect to a server, and the server sends its server-based certificate, which is an SSL or TLS certificate, and the client wants to make sure, or the client wants to make sure, that this certificate can be trusted, and therefore reaches out to the certificate authority and checks on the CRL, on the certificate revocation list, and see if the certificate is on this list. If not, checks if the validity is still ongoing, and then will trust the certificate from the server. Then we also have the Online Certification Status Protocol, OCSP, which handles a little bit differently because it's a little bit more dynamic here. We still pretty much have the same structure, so the server sends the SSL TLS certificate to the client, but the client will reach out to a certificate revocation server and send a standardized request, OCSP request, to check the status of the certificate. And this one will give an answer back, which could be in 3 different ways: good, revoked, or unknown. So either a certificate is good, which means it's valid, could be used. It is revoked, has been revoked before the lifetime of the certificate ends. And lastly, unknown. The certificate is not being issued by this CA. So it's pretty much a fake certificate. So both ways work pretty similar, but OCSP will give you a little bit more details, and it's a little bit more optimized approach on checking the online status of certificates. I really hope today's session helped you guys understand a little bit more about certificates, PKI, a bit of digital signatures. And yeah, I would be happy to have some comments from you guys, how you like the previous sessions, what you would love to see or hear in the next upcoming sessions. And yeah, I guess have a good day and stay safe.